Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daily Self-Publishing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Sutton. Today, I'm with Adrienne MacIain. Dr. Adrienne is a creation coach, a best-selling author, a podcaster, a storyteller who delights in using her PhD in drama, wow, to help creators, I can't talk today, of all stripes spin their mucky straw of life experience into narrative gold. I absolutely love that. Adrienne, thank you so much. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big word nerd, so yeah, I have a lot of wordplay.
I love it. I do that myself sometimes, and I'm like, oh, maybe I need to scale this back. But after reading and talking to you for the last few minutes, I might just scale it up. I don't know. Maybe I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Well, Adrienne, you are the author of 3 books: Melting Ivory, Playing on the Edge, I'm sorry, and Enough. And there's long subtitles to that, and we'll talk about those, and I'll link to those in the show. But I'm excited to talk to you. You know, the first thing I want to know is, why did you decide to write a book in the first place?
So I actually have been an avid journaler since I was about 9 years old. I always kept a journal, but I never thought that anyone would actually want to, read about anything that happened to me. Because of course, when I started, there wasn't a whole lot happening to me. I was a 9-year-old kid. But then I kept journaling all the way through, my 20s and my 30s. And I realized, looking back, that I had a pretty interesting story here. And people kept asking me, you kind of give anecdotes, right? Just in life, you tell a little snippet of a story. And I would say something like, oh, yeah, there was that time that I got shot at in the coup d'etat in West Africa. And people would be like, whoa, 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 wait, what was that middle thing? I'd say, oh, yeah, my ex-husband, he almost killed me. And, it's like, wait, what? What happened? So I decided it was probably best to just make it into a book so that I could give it to people to read. And since I already had all these journal entries, I actually had most of the story already captured. But the challenge for me was not actually the writing, it was the editing. It was going back and figuring out what's actually relevant to an outside audience to narrow it down, because there was so much extraneous information in there. And also just to figure out which characters needed to be there, which characters did not need to be there, figuring out the emotional arc of the story rather than just trying to put it into chronological order of like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
Right.
And so that, for me, actually opened up a whole new world to me of understanding narrative and how story structure works. And so that's what I do now, is I help other people see their stories as stories and figure out how to give them as a gift to an audience that needs them.
I love that. I love storytelling is such a powerful thing. And I hope that anybody in marketing, writing, podcasting has heard that already. But if you haven't, storytelling is powerful. Learn how to do it. and Dr. Adrienne can help you. So awesome. What was the hardest part of writing the book process? I think you already said editing, but I'll let you
editing. I mean, writing is rewriting, and it's the editing that is the hardest part. I really, really recommend that you get an outsider to help you. Not just because, professional editors are good at what they do, but because just having an outside eye gives you insight into how others will experience your story, because you're too far inside of it. I always say it's like being old Mother Hubbard, or the little old woman who lives in a shoe, right? You don't know you live in a shoe unless you've been outside of it. To you, it's just like, oh, I've got this nice leather couch that I sit on every day. And I have these nice little round skylights up here. It doesn't look like a shoe from the inside.
You may not know you're living in a shoe. You need someone to tell you.
You need someone to tell you.
That's amazing. Okay, last question on this episode is, what has been the most unexpected reward of you writing your book?
Oh my gosh, having people write to me and say to me, you gave me the courage to leave my relationship. That's huge. These people who are in emotionally abusive relationships just writing to me and saying, you empowered me, your story empowered me, you gave me the tools that I needed to be able to leave and stay out of it. That I knew that, I hoped that people would get inspired by what I wrote to make changes in their lives, but actually hearing the stories of people who did, it's unparalleled. It's unparalleled. I can't even explain how that impacts you.
Yeah, it's really cool when people start to tell you, hey, your podcast, your book, your live video, whatever it is, really changed my life. I don't think I'll ever get sick of it.
Never.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Adrienne, thank you so much for jumping on today for this short episode. Where can we go find out more about you if we want to work with you, get your books, things like that?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, which is www.that'sallowed.com. Like I said, word nerd.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Let me do a little clap here and we'll go step it two. Hey,
Fantastic.
everybody, welcome. All right, let's do it. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daily Self-Publishing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Sutton. I'm back here with episode 2 of Dr. Adrienne MacIain. She is a podcaster, storyteller, just an amazing author, best-selling author of 3 books. And we're going to talk more about how she believes 2020 gave us a jar of expired olives.
And we made a quarantini.
We made a quarantini. We're really not talking about that, but Adrienne, thanks for coming back on episode 2. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
I decided that my season 4 of my podcast was going to be called Hindsight 2020 or 2020 Hindsight. And the reason was I really felt like there were so many stories that just aren't being explored yet of how 2020 changed us as individuals and as a society, and not necessarily in negative ways. I think it had some really positive impacts as well.
Absolutely. You know, 2020 was my best year ever in business. You know, and I think one thing was it made me realize, which my business is all online, is, hey, we're here. Like, I'm online. You can still reach people. And then, like, my wife was a stay-at-home mom until this year, and now she does part-time teaching at a local university. But she got to spend what we called the endless summer, because it literally went on forever that she taught our kids. But she's like, you know, I'll never not appreciate that time I got to spend with our kids.
Yeah.
And those are 2 amazing things that happened just to us. And so I know I've heard stories from other guests on the podcast, authors that I work with, things like that, and they feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, the subtitle actually of Melting Ivory is Life Happens for You, not to you. And I really believe that. I think that, you know, we always have the choice of how, you know, we don't have a choice over what happens, right? But we always have a choice in terms of how we respond to that and what we decide to do with it. And I've just seen so many amazing ways that people have thrived during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, obviously, we know about the negative things. We hear about those 53 times a day if you watch any news whatsoever. But there has been a lot of positive come out of this. Before we go any further, I just want to say how jealous I am of your bookcase behind you, because if you're on the podcast, you can't see this, but she has like 3 million books behind her, and I just want to like go and start picking books out because I'm a book nerd. So on the last episode, we talked briefly about why you decided to write a book, and you talked about, you know, you had journaled since you were 9, and then you were telling all these stories about your life, and people were like, whoa, wait a minute, what's a coup d'etat? What's this, and you know, all this stuff. And so talk about how important it is to take the stories that you have inside of you and share with other people.
Absolutely. I always say, you know, once you've experienced something, that's not for you anymore. You already had that experience, but now you have a story that's for other people. And once you tell it as a story, it's like, you know, you've been looking at it, you've been looking through that story at the world, like a pair of glasses that you're not even aware that you're wearing, until you take it off. And then you look at it and go, oh, look, there's a pair of glasses here. That's what I've been filtering the world through. And so once you take that story and are able to give it to the people who really need it, because they need a roadmap through the same territory that you've just been through, then you're able to walk away from it and let it go and not allow it to define your future.
Yeah. I did a video one time that said, you know, don't forget your future, but don't let it define you either. Like, honor your past. Basically, honor the things that you've had to go through, the hells that you've had to go through in this life, and use those to help other people. And I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
It really can make, I mean, that's why you can mentor people and coach people, because we've gone through the things that they're going through, and we can say, hey, I did this and made circles for 10 years or whatever. And now I know the straight path for you to go on.
Well, the other thing is that you'd be amazed at how much of your story other people will relate to. Yeah. Just the emotional arc of the story is kind of universal. We all go through these experiences that are kind of this hero's journey, where we have this conflict or this crisis, or we feel like we need to separate ourselves from the world that we've known. And then we go through this process of figuring out, you know, here's this obstacle. How am I going to get over this? what am I going to do? And you try to go over it, you try to go under it, you try to go around it, and you figure out, nope, the only way is through. And so then you learn all these tools, you learn all these, new skills to get yourself through this thing. And then you suddenly find yourself at some unexpected day where you sort of look around and go, oh, I'm looking at it from a different angle. I'm on the other side of it now.
Yeah.
Things can be different now.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I tell people all the time, like you look back, did you make it through that? Yes. Did you die? No. Okay, you're probably going to make it through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a great attitude, Adrienne. Talk about, so you're writing your book, and what were some of the hardest parts to getting that done? I know we talked about editing, but what specifically about the editing was so rough?
Well, in this case, so my first book, Melting Ivory, I actually wrote, just a little clarification. The Playing on the Edge, the book Playing on the Edge, is actually my dissertation. And so I did write, that first, but didn't publish it until I realized how easy it was to self-publish, and then thought, hey, I've also got this dissertation. I should just go ahead and publish that too. Yeah. But Melting Ivory was the first book that I kind of wrote as a book, intending to publish it. And it was a long process. It took me 2 years to get this thing out. And the reason was because although I had already written the entire thing as a journal is a very difficult thing to edit because it is your own private thoughts and everything seems so important to you at the time. And so you have to be able to have that distance on it of looking back and trying to see it as a story and shape it as a story. And there were characters that I had to excise altogether because they just weren't moving the plot forward. And there were people who were not that important who became important characters in the book version because I just had to kind of mush a bunch of people into one representative person.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so it's a very interesting thing trying to tell a true story, but in a way that is a story. And it's not just an account of this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So break that down a little bit more. Like, so you took your story, which is all true, but you made it kind of fictional to make it make sense and impact
to make
people.
It readable.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise you're literally just reading my travel journals and, who wants to do that?
Yeah. How did you decide, what characters to merge into one another, which ones to take out? How did you do that?
Some of it was protecting the innocent. There were some people who I knew that if this story ever got read by the wrong people, those people would get in trouble. And I didn't want them to get in trouble. And so I kind of merged them into one sort of like anonymous representative character. There were other times where it just didn't make sense to have all the different voices and characters that for people to remember, like, oh, who are you talking about? I don't even remember this person. And so the important bits I would kind of have said by one representative person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense.
I was just trying to make it easy on my audience so that they didn't have to remember, 5 million names and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's more important too for everybody listening to understand like this. There's a certain part of humility or a big part of humility that says, okay, I can take these people out of this story because it's not about you. It was about the reader. That's
right. And there was a lot of stuff that, as they say, it's really hard, but you have to learn how to kill your darlings, right? Those things that you thought were so clever or interesting or sounded so cool, like they just aren't moving the plot forward. And so you got to save those for something else or just take them out of there. This thing was huge at first. I mean, it was volumes and volumes. And I thought about, releasing it as like a trilogy or something like that. But then I realized, no, I really wanted people to understand that this was all one experience of mine. It happened in the space of about 2 years. And I really wanted them to get that sense of like how fast this all happened for me. Yeah. And so I condensed it into one book.
Yeah. And I know that was hard. You talk about killing your darlings. I mean, you don't, I mean, how do you decide what's not important about your story? It's difficult.
Well, and again, I think you get somebody else to tell you that.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. I think that's been the theme with everybody. I think at this point I've interviewed about 30 or 40 people for the podcast. And that's been pretty much the biggest theme is get an editor. Please get an editor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you don't hear anything else, we say, please get an editor.
Please, for everyone's sake.
Yeah. So your book, you told me, was about helping people in abusive situations. And you said that was one of the biggest unexpected things was people saying, hey, I left my abusive spouse or whatever. Talk about how, I know you said you market kind of a grassroots campaign. Just give us a little bit of insight into how you did that from marketing.
Yeah, so let me go back just a moment if I can before I do that. Because my third book, Enough, was actually, I wrote that book because of how many people asked me after reading Melting Ivory, but then what happened? What did you do then? How did you, address this pattern in your life? And how did you heal from that and move forward? Because, of course, it's not just a simple, you leave and that's it. It often becomes this pattern in your life of finding yourself in these abusive situations over and over again. And even within the course of this book, there are several different, relationships that you see that are not healthy. And so I decided to write a second book just to give people a sense of, okay, this is the step-by-step how I actually went about doing this. These are the tools that I used, and this is a sort of workbook to help you do the same thing in your life. Leave a bad relationship, leave a bad job, any of these things. And so that's why I did that. And I'm sorry, what was your question? I know I was going to tie it in.
Yeah, I don't even know anymore. No, I'm just kidding. So how did you use your grassroots campaign to market your book?
Right. Okay. So what I decided when I had written Enough is this is really a handbook for people who are in emotionally abusive relationships right now. And so how do I get this into their hands? And so I decided the best way to do that was to start contacting organizations that are out there to help people who are in abusive relationships or trying to leave abusive relationships. Now, most of them focus on domestic violence, like physical abuse. And this is about emotional abuse. But I think all abuse has an emotional component to it.
Absolutely.
And so I reached out to these people and just basically said, hey, do you want free copies of my book to give to people? And at first they were a little bit worried. They were like, who are you? What's your angle? But once I kind of explained myself, they were like, yeah, of course we want that. That would be wonderful. So I've sent free books to women's shelters. I've sent free books to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, places like that. And, more than just giving out the free books, it was really about letting them know that this was a resource that they then can use. Because it was really important to me. I didn't feel like, everyone in the world needed to read my book. I felt like there's a very specific group of people that needs to read my books. And how do I get it in their hands? And so that's been my quest.
Yeah, I love that. And we talked about that earlier, and you said, I didn't need everybody to read my book. And I laughed because that was before we started recording. That's probably going to be the title of this podcast. But so I know somebody's going to be listening and saying, I have a book about abuse or alcoholism or whatever it is, and I need to get it into the hands of Mothers Against Drunk Drivers or whatever it is. How was that kind of a nerve-wracking process, or were they cordial, talking to you? Things, how was that?
They were very friendly. I mean, again, once they kind of get the sense of who I am and what my real intent is, they were very welcoming and grateful.
Yeah. And did you just look at their website, find their number and just call them?
Mostly emailed. I just emailed folks and just said, hey, I just want you to know, I wrote this book. I think it would be really useful. I'm happy to send you some free copies if you're interested. Let me know.
Yeah, love that. And I like that you said, hey, you're leading with value. I'm going to send you free copies. Hey,
exactly.
Guys, if you're listening, don't do this. Don't call some organization and say, hey, I have this amazing book. I'd like to sell you 100 copies at $2 a copy or whatever. That's not value.
Don't do that.
That's self-promotion. Love it. Oh man, that's amazing. So your books, so that's allowed. Tell me about your podcast and your website, why that's allowed.
Yeah. So I started the podcast, honestly, as a dare to myself, if that makes any sense. I think often we do this to ourselves. It's just I need to get over this fear, or I need to get over this block, right? And so I'm just going to make myself do this thing. And so I had this nagging feeling of I'm not as good a storyteller as I think I am, or people won't care about my stories. And so I forced myself to do a whole season of me just telling my own stories.
Wow.
And that's allowed came from, it's like the two sides of this little inner conversation I have every time I would do this, which is there's part of me that's like, that's allowed. We can all hear you. You're going to humiliate yourself. You're going to embarrass yourself. People are going to be horrified. And then there's the other part of me that's like, you know what? That's allowed. I am allowed to talk about these things because these things really happened. These are true stories which occurred. And I think it's important for other people who may have gone through similar experiences to know that they're not alone, to know that there's a way out, there's a way through, right? And that I'm here if they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so that was where this all came from. And so that first season, like I said, was just me telling my own, messed up memoirs, as I called them.
Yeah.
And then I realized, maybe I could help more directly. Like maybe I can actually help other people start to share their stories, because not everybody understands narrative structure and not everybody understands that their story is useful and important to somebody else. And so I just started at first inviting, friends, people I thought, had interesting stories to come on, and I would ask them the right questions to just kind of tease out a story. And then it expanded from there a little bit. And I realized that I didn't just want to help people, deal with their past. I wanted to help them recognize that they control their future. They are the author of their own story. And so I started adding in this extra element at the end, which is a little exercise that I take them through, where I put them into their ideal world, just to have them experience that for a moment, to start to figure out, like, what do I really desire to create in my life? And from there, I started to realize I could expand this and open this up, because the question that I had been kind of starting with was, what's the story you're not telling? But then I realized I could also have on there experts, people who, have a really strong message to share. And so I opened that question up to, what's the story the world isn't getting? And so over time, it's kind of changed and iterated a little bit at a time. And so now, like I said, we've come to season 4, which is just starting actually tomorrow. The first episode drops.
Yeah.
And this one is very specifically about just, hey, use storytelling to help your entire community to deal with what just happened and you're still dealing with right now, to give people hope, to give people a roadmap, to give people ideas and, get their imagination going of like, how can you turn this expired jar of olives into a quarantini?
I love it. I love that. And I love the accent, by the way. And we're going to talk more about that accent before we get off the podcast, just letting you know. So I like that. And it all comes back to books and podcasts and blogs and everything. And, podcasting and writing books are my two favorite mediums to communicate with the world. And so, but it all tracks to books. Like, you have a story, you have a roadmap, you have a framework, you have experience, share it with people. Like,
Yes.
how else does the world improve if we don't share the mistakes that we've made and the lessons that we've learned from them? So I'm super excited that you're doing that. And especially when you did it in an accent, that makes it even better. Oh, Adrienne, tell us, what are 3 to 5 to 20 tips that you would give someone who's writing a book, and what would you tell them?
So first of all, don't call it a book. Just
Okay.
start writing. Because as soon as you say, I'm writing a book, that is intimidating. It is scary. It feels like, where do I start? What's going to be the first page? It doesn't matter. Just start writing some stuff. It may turn out to be a book, or it may turn out to be a blog, or it may turn out to be a script for a podcast, or it may turn out to be a one-woman show, or it may turn out to be a one-act play. You don't know what it is when you're writing it. And that's the beauty of it. Just enjoy the process of sharing your story and let it tell you what it is.
Yeah.
So that's number 1.
That's good. That's a good one.
That's a big one. I get that one so often. I help writers all the time. And, that's one of the things that I do. I'm what I call a book midwife is, people come to me and they're like, I know I have a book in me, but like, I don't know what it is. And I'm like, maybe it's not a book. You don't know what it is. Like, you have something inside of you. You have a masterpiece in there, and we're going to help pull it out of you, but we don't know what shape that's going to take. And that's beautiful.
Yes.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is, your story is important to someone. Okay.
Ooh.
Your story might be somebody else's survival story. Your story might be the light at the end of somebody else's tunnel. You don't know who that story's for until you put it out there and they find it. So really never underestimate the power of your own story. Never think it's only for you. It's not even for you anymore. You already experienced it. It's for someone else and you don't even know who that is yet, but you have to put it out there so it can find them.
Ooh.
And the third thing is that I really believe that most of what happens is that we channel. Like we're not even, creating this stuff. It's like you just have to open yourself up to inspiration. You have to open yourself up to that channel of creativity and allow it to flow through you. And I'm actually working on another book right now, which is going to be called Release Your Masterpiece. And it's all about how to clear that channel, how to prepare yourself to have a creative experience, and how to invite inspiration and, keep it coming back. Because I always say, if you're sitting around your house in your pajamas, waiting for a prince to come to your house and take you to a ball, ain't never going to happen, Cinderella. Okay. You got to get your ball gown on. You got to get warmed up. You got to learn those dances, and you got to get out there to every freaking ball in town and start dancing before you find your prince. Okay. So that's what it's all about. Find opportunities to give your gifts and just keep giving them until you find that thing that just goes whoosh, and it all starts to happen.
Oh, guys, fellow book bosses, future book bosses, anybody listening to this, you just had a sermon on how to write anything. Oh,
Yep.
my goodness. That was amazing.
That's a creation masterclass. You're welcome.
That is exactly what that was. And I am super excited for it. So the last question, Adrienne, I like to research people before we get on here, just so we know a little bit about each other. Mm-hmm. And, in case there's somebody that I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to this person, and I'll make up some excuse. I'm not going to interview you today. I never do that. Sometimes. But anyway, you had this party trick where I saw you reading a book and somebody's like sliding through note cards. And so you had a Texas accent. Do you have a Louisiana accent?
Well, I kind of have a Louisiana accent. It's not my favorite. It's not my best.
That ain't even close, sister. No. So just give me 3 of your favorite accents before we get finished.
Irish is probably one of my favorites. I love it. I think it's one of the most beautiful accents on the earth. I just think it's like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it speaks to me on a very heartfelt level. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And just to give the other side of that, I do a Scottish accent, and a lot of people think that's the same. That is like the Irish and the Scottish. They don't sound remotely the same to me. I think they're completely different. And probably my favorite is the French, because I have lived in a lot of places where they are speaking the French, and so I have this accent. And also, I know that they make a lot of sounds like this between they are speaking, so that they don't get interrupted, I assume.
Oh my gosh. So I have done well over 300 podcast episodes, and that is the first multilingual accent we've had on here. So I love it. Adrienne, this has been amazing. Tell us again, where do we go to find you? How do you help people? That kind of amazing stuff.
Absolutely. So you can come to my website and find out all the wonderful things I do. It's www.that'sallowed.com.
Amazing. And I will have every book link, every website, and I will even have the link to that YouTube video with your party trick in it, so people can enjoy that like we just did.
Fantastic.
Adrienne, thank you so much. It's just an absolute pleasure.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.